We sometimes use the expression fair weather friend to describe a person who is with us when things are going well, but vanishes as soon as the going gets rough. And if we think about it, a fair weather friend is in fact no friend at all. And I think of that expression as I listen to today's readings. The readings speak of discipleship, what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And just as fair weather friends are no friends at all, Jesus warns us against being fair weather disciples. If it is true that a fair weather friend is not really a friend at all, it is equally true that a fair weather disciple is not a disciple at all. Today's first reading tells the story of Elisha, the prophet Elijah's successor. Elijah is coming to the end of his service to the chosen people, and speaking God's word in season and out of season has cost him, and he is tired. In fact, he's so tired that he prays for death. But God strengthens him to make a 40-day journey to anoint and then to mentor Elisha, whom God has picked as his successor. And Elijah finds Elisha working in the field, and without saying a word, he places his mantle, his cloak over Elisha, and then moves on. And Elisha comes running after him and tells him that he will follow him, that he accepts the call that God has placed on his life. But there's something that he must do first. And as a sign that he is leaving behind his old way of life completely, he slaughters his oxen, breaks up his plow, and uses the wood to prepare a fire, to prepare a meal for his family. And through those actions, he shows that there is nothing from his old way of life to which he can now return. As he follows Elijah, he is all in. He is completely at God's disposal, and no one could call Elisha a fair-weather prophet. St. Luke's gospel today, in the gospel, Jesus is beginning his journey toward Jerusalem, where he will respond to God's call to sacrifice his life for the world's redemption. And this journey, which is at the very heart of St. Luke's gospel, will continue for the next 9 chapters. And along the way, Jesus teaches us about discipleship. The shortest way to Jerusalem is through Samaria. And Samaritans and Jews, both descendants of Abraham, were nonetheless bitter enemies. The Samaritans were Jews who had intermarried with people already living in the Holy Land, and they were looked upon as second-class citizens by the Jews. And the Samaritans had not been allowed to contribute toward the building of the temple in Jerusalem, and as a result, they rejected Jerusalem as the holy city. And so as Jesus sends word that he's coming to Samaria, it becomes known that he's on his way to Jerusalem, and he is rejected by the Samaritans. They refuse to listen to anything he has to say. And the reaction of James and John is to call down fire and brimstone on the Samaritans, but Jesus rebukes them. And Jesus has come to teach a new way of life, a way that replaces the old law of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Jesus teaches us that violence can never be used to achieve our goals. Jesus teaches that the end does not justify the means. A good end must be brought about always by a good means. And it's very likely, in the light of Friday's Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade, that we will need to remember this in the coming days if groups like Jane's Revenge make good on their threat to attack pregnancy centers and churches. Fair-weather disciples will abandon what Jesus teaches and resort to violent words and actions. We might remember that Mahatma Gandhi wisely said that the problem with the old law of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is that eventually it leaves the whole world blind and toothless. I ask myself, what would my reaction be if our church was spray painted or ransacked or the tabernacle stolen? I know my natural reaction would be that of James and John, but if I acted with that natural reaction, I would show myself to be a very poor disciple of Jesus. As Jesus continues his journey, he meets a man who willingly accepts the call to discipleship, telling Jesus that he will follow him wherever he goes. But Jesus cautions him to think about what he's saying. He challenges the would-be disciple to read the fine print before he signs up for discipleship, because discipleship may cause us to lose our security, it might cause us to lose all that we have, our home, our finances, our reputation, our career. Fair-weather disciples were turned back as soon as any of these things are placed at risk. Jesus challenges the man in the gospel to think long and hard about what he is doing. Only a person who is willing to risk everything can be a true disciple of Jesus. I experienced a powerful example of this when I lived in Sudan. Security police for the Muslim government would stand outside the doors of churches on Sunday. They would write down the names of government workers who were attending Sunday Mass. And those workers knew that attending Mass could mean the end of any hope for a promotion and perhaps the end of their jobs and their paychecks as civil servants of a government opposed to Christianity. But in spite of that, people walked miles to get to Mass on Sunday, and churches were overflowing. Sudanese Christians showed themselves to be authentic disciples, no matter what the cost, no matter what at risk. Jesus then encounters a man who says that he's willing to follow Jesus, but he must first bury his father. And this was a common expression used in Palestine at the time of Jesus. It doesn't mean that the man's father has just died and Jesus tells them to skip the man's funeral. The expression means at some future time. The man is telling Jesus at some future time, after the eventual death of his parents, he will be free to follow Jesus. But until then, there are more pressing concerns, more important things for the man than the call to discipleship. And Jesus teaches us that discipleship is not just one of many important things in life, it is the most important thing and cannot be put off to some undetermined future date. In the immortal words of Elvis Presley, it's now or never. Another man announces his decision to follow Jesus, but wants to return to his family to say goodbye. And it certainly doesn't sound like a bad thing, but again, Jesus hides nothing from us about the cost of discipleship. The decision to be a disciple of Jesus is so important that everything else takes second place to it, even family. The journey to Jerusalem begins with all that will mean for Jesus. And along the way, he meets people who want to accompany him on that journey, who want to share in the vision he is proposing of a new world. Jesus believes in truth in advertising. The demands of following Jesus are great, and there's no way around it. But the rewards are also great. In fact, the rewards are out of this world. Fair-weather friends are, in fact, not really friends at all. And Jesus would remind us today that fair-weather disciples are not really disciples at all. The scriptures challenge me to ask myself, what kind of disciple am I? What kind of disciple do I want to be? What kind of disciple does Jesus call me to be?